This is Catherine Cespedes, and you are listening to Yogini from the Block, where we talk about taking spiritual practices and spiritual principles off of the yoga mat and into our real lives. You can listen to this bi-weekly podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, and anywhere that you catch your podcasts. Welcome to episode 20, titled It Takes Two to Tango, subtitled Love That Has No Limits. Today I have my wonderful producer, John Beethan.
Good generic time of the day, everyone out there.
And I have a guest, my boyfriend, my significant other, Kevin Graham.
Pleasure to be here.
So today, Kevin and I decided that we would be talking about love. And so we talked about a lot of topics, what we can talk about, what would be appropriate to talk about. And by appropriate, I mean what we feel like we know very, very well. Mm-hmm. And that had to do with love. And we did some research.
We did.
Trying to find the definition of love. By research, I mean, I went on my phone and I Googled love, right, to find what it meant. And I was very underwhelmed with the definitions that came up. One of them was to love with deep, intense emotion. And I felt like, yeah, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. And so this is what started this conversation this morning. And Kevin had some great definitions. Do you remember them? Do you remember what you were saying?
No, true to the idea of love, I was speaking from the heart. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
I know.
So you did say a few things about love being evolving, love being across the distance, right? Because right now we are in a long distance relationship.
Yes.
And we've had to learn how to communicate. And love definitely has a lot to do with communication. And this doesn't only pertain to romantic love. This also pertains to any kind of relationship where there's two human beings involved. That being a professional relationship, you need communication. In family, you need communication. And we just had Thanksgiving, so I felt like this was perfect all around. I suggest that you take what works for you, and you can really apply this to any kind of relationship in your life. I know that I feel like this relationship with Kevin, what it has done for me is that it has worked as like an osmosis effect, which is what I wanted to title this podcast. But we did not agree, so we continued searching until we found something that fit both of us. And by osmosis, I mean that what I have been learning through this relationship, I have been using it and reapplying it to other relationships in my life. When it comes to communication and how to communicate and how to really be open and vulnerable so that I am heard and so that I feel heard. And I'm just going to dive in because while we were doing this research, we found on the Huffington Post, huffpost.com, there is an article titled 16 Characteristics of Love. And I pulled only 3. And these are the 3 that we talk about a lot. And one of them is love is the absence of fear. So as it reads from the Huffington Post, the article 16 Characteristics of Love. You can also check out my show notes. The link is directly on there. When you read it, you can go ahead, click it, and then it'll open it up for you so that you can read it for yourself. Love is the absence of fear. You can put all emotions on a continuum. On one end, you have love, then appreciation. After that, it's joy, happiness, contentment, and satisfaction. On the opposite side of the continuum of love is fear. Other fear-based emotions include hatred, insecurity, jealousy, or greed.
Okay, so I'm going to say something now because I was just admiring you. No, I really was. And I said, Kev, you should say something because I don't get to see this. So this is beautiful to watch, you know. But I think I said, yeah, and I do agree with it. To me, it's very novel in that I think I remember saying to you, at one point, and this was sort of early on when I was now getting into understanding my emotions around love, and I had said, for me, love is a verb. It's not a noun in that it's not a place. It doesn't reside in one spot. It's not entirely conceptual. For me, when I feel like I love you, it prompts action. I can't be still. So in my relationship with you, what I've noticed is my actions are a direct expression of my love for you. And that's how I continually feel it, and for me, in terms of the fact that there is some distance, my actions in many ways, I think, in your actions, because I said what I love about us is that somehow we walk towards each other. It is that action that mends the distance. So for me, it is exactly a verb, because I continually act. It's an expression of my love. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the 16 characteristics.
Right.
Which we discovered later on, because this is something that Kevin talks about all the time. And he calls it love in action. This is just what he does. And what it says on the Huffington Post is love is an action, not just a feeling. And humans tend to be addicted to intense emotion, especially when it feels good. So when we're in love, we want to feel that way forever. But guess what? That higher than cloud nine feeling goes away after a while. That doesn't mean you don't love the other person anymore. It just means that it's not new anymore. So that's where the action needs to kick in. Show the person you love them. Don't just assume that they know.
Right.
And that's what you were talking about.
Yeah. You can't, in that space. You really can't make any assumptions. And I've learned that. I've learned that with you 1,000 times over. Because one thing that we, in our circumstance, in being on two different coasts, 2 different times, you're 3 hours ahead of me, is communication is key. You can't I can't say, well, she knows. No, our main medium of communication is direct dialogue. So I think that, for me, that has allowed me to express this thing called love in so many unique ways, and in a way that I didn't even know I had, to be honest with you. So,
yeah. And how do you think that you were able or are able to get to that point of having love in action?
How? That's the magic. That is the magic, and that's the question. How? I would be at a loss for words if I were to, or this podcast would have to be the entirety of our relationship to capture it, which be 95, 90, 100 years plus, to capture that how. It is something that I'm learning bits and pieces of every day. So when I relinquish, so can I use an F word in?
No F words.
Okay, no F words. Fear, right? It means...
Oh, that F word.
Yes. Can I...
Go ahead. I was like, he doesn't even curse. What?
No. I really was gonna, because I was gonna give a definition of what fear is.
Gotcha.
So, in not using the F word, it means fear, F everything and run.
Oh, okay.
Right? So for me, it was facing that fear. I couldn't run from it, So I pushed in some way. Part of that how is not even pushing. It was this conscious allowance of fear to move out of the way. Because what I was feeling was real. And either I stifled the feeling, right? Or I faced it. So that was part of the how. And that's probably 0.5%. So this is like the iceberg. That was the tip of the how. And with me releasing or stepping out of that fear and saying, you know what? I love this woman. And that means so much to me. And I'm not even going to try to tackle or understand what that means. I'm going to go with it. So in simply going with it, I've discovered this idea of letting go and allowing and just the purity of what comes into that space. And that the half of it is you. So in describing how, right? Even for, it's like the old saying of, loving you is easy because you love me. So part of that how is the you loving me. So, and that's not even the full thing.
No, it isn't.
Right.
It isn't. So what I'm ultimately getting to is that the other big, I feel like the number one reason why love works in so many realms, whether it be romantic, mostly romantic, or wherever else we want to place this love, is the love of self. First, I had to completely immerse myself in love for myself, because that taught everybody else how to love me. That taught you how to love me. And the way that you love yourself taught me how to love you. Right. I think that was the number one, that's the number one key in all of this, and in communication, in understanding, and being compassionate, in growing, right? In growing as an individual, and as growing as a couple, growing as a family unit. Because as I evolve with all the classes that I'm taking, I'm in prac, I'm taking classes. It doesn't mean, and you've said this to me so many times, it doesn't mean that I'm going to grow and then just go out there by myself and just be a loner. It's possible. If that's something that I want, I could definitely do it. But what you said to me, or what you consistently say to me, is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go with people.
Yeah. Can I say something about that?
Yes.
So two things pop into mind when you said that idea of love of self. For me, it was, because, disclaimer, we have similar thoughts, but the way our mind works is completely different. Saying it's like math and English doesn't even quite cover it. It's something beyond that. So for me, that idea of love of self. For me, it was the old adage of know thyself. So that's how I experienced that, because I had come to maturation, and I'm still maturing, where I had garnered a good level of knowing myself. And I can see that, and you just said that, and seeing that and listening to what you just said, it makes a great deal of sense in that I did learn how to love you based on your self-love. Because I'm like, this woman respects herself. It's not like love came across in so many ways. In some instances, I saw it as respect for herself. In some instances, I saw it as, man, she cares for herself. In some instances, I saw it as, because you have a lot of positive self-talk. So even picking up on that, clued me into what was nurturing in the space of love. So a lot of positivity, a lot of candor, being candid, a lot of honesty and integrity. Because I know something that you say to me a lot is, how does that feel? That question right there, right off the back. When you find a woman that says to you, how does that feel? For me, I was like, how do I tackle this question? It was a moment of pause for me. I'm like, wait. Not often in life am I asked to check in with my feelings, A lot of times is it, what do you think? And Bruce Lee said it, don't think, feel, right? And for me at that time, reading it was conceptual. It was like, that's cool. But when she said it to me, it was real in that, how does that, and you still say it, even on big things, on small things, how does that feel for you? So that, for me, helps us to be in the space of a genuine space, in that a lot of times we don't move forward unless something feels good for the both of us. Even with deciding the titles for this, for this one, we had a total of 10 titles.
Yeah. And
I wrote each and every one of them down. And, finally, while eating breakfast, she says to me, okay, this one. And I said, okay, that feels. So in hanging with you, I turned into a feel versus think. I still think, because academically that works. But in terms of stepping into our relationship, I feel that not only do I think, but there's this switch where I can think and feel. Okay, I don't want to say too much. But
no, you're doing great. You are doing wonderful, and that leads me to the next characteristic, which is love is not needing. It is wanting. So not needing. someone, it's more of wanting or not needing to feel like you have to do something. It's the wanting to do that something. And here's what they say. One of the things we try to teach kids is that there is a clear difference between a want and a need. Needing someone is a feeling based on fear. You fear that you can't live without them, so you need them. And remember, fear is the opposite of love. Wanting someone in your life gives them the freedom to leave, but still shows them you love them. So combined with loving myself and what I want, how I want to be loved, how I want to be treated, how I want to express. It sounds selfish, but it's also very selfless, because now I know what I want, and so I am going to give this. I am going to give this love that I give myself to other people, especially in my relationship with you. I want to be treated this way, so I'm going to treat you this way. I want to feel this way, so I am going to do things that would allow you to feel this way. I want to feel heard, and so I listen. One of those kinds of things. Yeah. I want to feel appreciated, so I appreciate. And so it's selfish and selfless at the same time, because I am giving what I want and I am treating myself in that same way, and I'm holding myself to that regard. So I will always treat you that way. And I think we remind each other of that too. I mean, there have been times where we get into, what do you call them? Conversations. I call them arguments.
No. Yeah. So I say...
This one we don't agree on.
Oh man! So at the end of I call them sometimes clarifying conversations. Kathy sometimes calls them what, arguments?
I call them arguments, and then when I want to turn them and spin them into something bigger, I call them leveling up. We're leveling up in our relationship.
Oh man!
But they are clarifying, and in those moments, sometimes what comes across is I'll say something that is not how I would treat myself. It is not how I want anyone to treat me. And he will remind me, this is not what we do. This is not who we are. And so I literally need to yield. I literally need to just put my ego aside and say, you're right. I'm sorry. Right. I'm sorry. I messed up.
Yeah. And for me, so I have so many thoughts right now. So one... When early days, when we started dating, and some might say it's still early days, because it is still early days. But
always early days.
It is always early days. So earlier on, when we discovered that we could yield to each other, I found it so sexy. I'm like, wow, we could yield to each other. This is interesting. Now I'm going to backtrack for a second, because I love that idea that you just explained between need and want, right? But in a way, and I do intentionally use this word but it is something that we don't hear. It is something that we're absolutely, at least let me speak for myself, conditioned out of, because growing up I heard a lot, your needs versus your wants, right? So focus on your needs. So it makes sense that love is placed in this place of needs. Like, woman, I need you. Listen to the songs. Yeah. Many of the songs challenge.
Movies.
Find a song that doesn't frame love in that I need her. I can't live without. And for me, that is a space of not to knock any songs or anybody
or any artist. You're all wonderful.
Right, because love looks different for different people.
Right.
It's in many ways it's this ambiguous thing. You can step into love in any way you want to. Need in love in many ways, Yeah, so I was saying this idea of needs versus wants within the space of love in a relationship. And I made the point earlier in that music and mainstream media frames it as a need, I need you. And in some ways, in some nuanced ways, right? It works. And I think so on a micro way it works. In micro ways it works. I think macro level, for me, when I think about that idea of needing, it's a deficit perspective in my mind, because you function out of a space of desperation versus true intentionality. And again, disclaimer, that's just me, and that's just what works for us, right? and we have to make room for what works for other people.
Right.
So in the space of needs versus want, like I want to be with you. You know, and not only do I say that love is a verb, love is a choice. It's a decision. You know, so I want to be with you, and I continually make that decision. Watch me be smooth now. And I continually make that decision every single day. You know, and for me, hope, my hope, my plan, my intention is to continue to make that decision in perpetuity. Look at that. So go ahead.
So what this makes me think of is it's very abstract when you're talking about a romantic relationship. And the reason why I keep bringing up family and
right.
and work professional is because I just want to show how it can be applicable, not only in a romantic relationship, how it's applicable in many other relationships. It can even be applicable when you're going to the register and you're checking out. Like just showing them the love and the respect that you want to have, that you want to show them, not that you feel like you need to show them because you're going to get something in return. How that is, how that works. For me, with my sisters, there was a point where I learned that they did not want my opinion all the time. Surprise, surprise. And so I learned how to ask, do you want me to listen or do you want to hear my opinion? And I think that has opened up the doors in how we communicate, because like you said, communication is key. So there is like love of self and then communication. So the communication between how you say things and the intention, the intention of what you're saying, because I feel like we set our intention of our relationship from the very beginning. There was one conversation where he said, Catherine, I would seriously date you. And so in that moment, he gave me the intention that he would seriously date me. And he literally said, don't use this number if you don't want to seriously date me. He didn't say it like that. He did. He said it very nice. He's going to clean it up for me.
Right. I will.
He said it nice, but that's how I interpreted it. I was like, I have to make a decision right now. But what that did was that it was a clear intention, and it basically told me that if we continue talking, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. There is a goal here. With my sisters, what happened was that one day my sister basically said, "Why can't you be the sister that I want you to be?" And I said, I will never be that. I will never be that sister. I will never be that daughter. I will never be that friend. I can't do that. But what I can do is that I can show up authentically and I can show up as me. And I'd rather have these kinds of conversations where we probably don't like each other right now, but we are being real and we're not just being on the surface talking about the weather, talking about movies, and that's it. Even though the weather and movies is a legit thing. It happens every day. But I wanted to know more about her. I wanted to have a real conversation. So what I'm saying here is the intention. My intention was not to be the perfect sister, but my intention was to be authentic and to be real and to legitimately be there for my sister. And that was the message I gave her. And so it was one of those where she could decide if that was the relationship she wanted, or if it was better for her to keep the intention that she wanted a perfect sister. And I think that intention, clearing that intention up between the both of us, cleared up a lot of energy in the past that we're still working through. We're all working on things, right? Like me, like mushing up a donut that she was going to eat when we were like 8 and like 4, things like that. Things like that, serious stuff. And other things that happened in our lives. And between you and I, you telling me this, your intention basically did the same thing for me, where I was like, if I walk through this door, this is what it's going to be. And one thing that was so powerful for me was that you said, I am not here to lock you down. I am not here to take away anything from you. I am not here to keep you closed in. If you want to leave, you can walk out at any time. I am here to be present. And if you want to be present, you can be here too. The doors will always be open.
Wow. This guy said that to you?
Yeah, you said that. Wow. It was
Keep
really...
Don't.
So it told me... What it told me was that you were going to, like, this is what I wanted. I wanted my freedom. I wanted to, and by freedom, I mean I love to dance. I wanted to continue dancing and taking these dance classes that I was doing. I wanted to travel. I wanted to know that I was free to continue being me, because in the past I was falling into these relationships where I didn't really have a clear intention. So it's not that the gentlemen were bad, is that I didn't have a clear intention, and thus I did not share what my intention was, and thus I ended up losing myself. And I feel like this happens not only in romantic relationships, but in relationships where there is expectations. Relationships where you expect me to do X, Y, and Z for you to be happy. And so I will lose my sense of self to give you what it is that you need. And that kind of selfless love doesn't seem to pan out because someone gets hurt. Either you didn't deliver what you told me you were going to deliver, or I feel like I've sacrificed for something that I didn't even want. So in this freedom that has worked for us, and this is whatever works for you, you may take, you may use, you may live, and whatever doesn't, you could just leave it here. We're just sharing this because this is something that we have, at least between our relationship, freedom and there was something else that was very big for us: love in action and respect and growth.
Yeah,
growth was very, very big. Intention being number one, because you can't grow without an intention. And we talked about this when I was in Colombia. This is one of the podcasts that we had about mapping the intentions before you move forward in everything that you do.
So I'll say a couple of things on that. One, we tell our story different. We've known that.
He's the romantic. I'm funny.
She is. So part of this is, I know I'll go with this one, because part of this is really and truly being true to yourself, in that I knew I was the romantic. I knew that I was the one who I'm into my feelings. I love the fact that I feel and I express, so I came in on that note, but I'm also very intentional, because as you mentioned earlier, so flashback. So one thing that Kathy and I were really good at doing was we would have these 3-hour conversations. And this was one of our 3-hour conversations where things were just going good, and we would have these conversations at interesting points of life, So this was another interesting point of life where I knew that we were both single. Mm-hmm. And we were having another fantastic 3-hour conversation. Mm-hmm. And, I said to myself, enough. So fellas, if you're listening, this is how you get out of the friend zone. No, I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be in the friend zone. This was a good 3-hour conversation. So I said to her, very tactfully, I said, I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm really enjoying this conversation. And she did her thing that she normally does, where she, smiles, because I knew she was smiling. And she said, I'm enjoying this too. This is fun. We should catch up more often, and blah-de-blah-de-boo, which, if you're listening, this is the close, when the voice drops, and we should catch up more. And this was great. And I stepped in and I said, you know what? This is fun. This is great. And we should catch up more. But here's one thing I want you to know. And I said, I would honestly and seriously date you. And I'm sharing this because I want you to know what my intention is behind it. I want you to know why I spend 3 hours on the phone. I want you to know from the angle that I'm coming in, why I'm looking to get to know you. And I said to her, if you choose not to, and I said it in a happy voice, I said, if you choose not to use this number after today, I completely understand. Right. So I'm on the edge. In my mind, I jumped. I was on the edge when I said, I would seriously date you. Right. That was the beginning. Like, I'm tippy-toeing. And then I jumped and I said, I really want to get to know you from the perspective of dating you. And true to herself, what she said to me? All this. I'm on the edge. I jumped. I'm free falling. She said to me, I found parking.
I did. You know how hard it is to find parking downtown? And I have found parking at that time. Yeah, but our story is for another time. But in that moment, in me embracing and being true to myself, look what came out of it. Because after she was done with her dance, because she was going to dance, after she was done,
she used the number again. And I was like, oh, wow. We didn't even have to say anything. We didn't have to debrief or anything. Actions. Look at that. Intentionality with actions. Because right after that, we knew. So...
But there was no expectation on his end that I had to reciprocate.
That's where I was going with it.
That I had to reciprocate right away, which allowed me the freedom to either reciprocate or to just say, you know what, thank you for the conversation. Thank you for your friendship. But I see where you're going and I'm not going in that direction. That was an option. And so not feeling cornered allowed me to, decide that I would take action as well.
Right. Oh, so yes. So thank you. Thank you for catching me right there, because that's exactly where I was going with it. And to the idea of freedom, because I think freedom is very important. I am a fan of conflict theory to the extent of it posits that if there is no conflict, then someone's being manipulated. Someone is overly pandering to the needs of the other person. So sometimes that conflict or that uncomfortable rub allows you to re-step into a space where you're both listening. And I think that's another key thing. You're listening, and this may sound cliche, listening beyond the space of looking to respond. So listening to understand instead of to respond. And that is key. That is key, because we're smart people. We can always respond. We can always formulate a response. So a lot of times what I find myself doing is listening to understand. Understand, and I'm going to tie this to freedom too, because I know that that's something that the two of us both value, because we met each other on an upswing. An upswing in terms of we're both learning more about ourselves. We're both doing very interesting things at the time, and it was a good space to connect. It was the law of timing. It was a really good time for us to connect, because remember, 10 years and voila, this was the time that it happened. And I knew that freedom was one thing that we talked about very, very early in our relationship. And for her, freedom looked like, continuing to dance. And look how faith works. I love to dance and traveling. And that's another thing that intersected between the two of us. So we're in a space where we are perpetually free. And I think love mobilizes in that freedom. So even in talking about love permeates all of these attributes, integrity, open communication, freedom, the idea of knowing thyself, which is the true self-love. That's where love ideally should, and I'm going to should right now, or could come from, that space of self-love.
And patience. So there is also a lot of patience that comes with this new knowing, this new learning, this new discovery of who you are and who you are surrounding yourself with. Because I think in this relationship, at least, Kevin has been incredibly patient with me. And I have been incredibly patient with others, because I know what that feels like, and it works. It works to be patient, not only with others, but especially with ourselves. Because how can I grow if I'm not being patient with myself? And how could I be okay with where I'm at, knowing that I'm going to grow, if I'm not patient with myself? And the moment that you stop asking, am I being patient with myself, is when you know that you are, is when you know that you're moving in a way that is comfortable for you. You know that you're moving in a way that is in integrity. It falls into an alignment. It falls into the intention of who you are and where you are. And these are all true for me. And it really sets the stage for how we all treat each other.
Right.
I'm patient with myself, and thus I'm patient with you, and thus I'm patient with a lot of people. And that doesn't mean that I'm perfect in no way, shape, or form. By the way, am I perfect? I just want to throw that out there in case lines got blurred. But these are practices that I instill in myself every day, so that I can not reach perfection, but so that I can continue to grow and learn and come into these kinds of conversations. Right.
And it's I feel like we're echoing some of the good old adages, like, patience is a virtue. And if you look across the field, I don't care what you study or what lane of life you're on. I think if you really and truly look, look, seek, and you shall find. It is there. Patience is there in a multiplicity of religion. If it's there in the world of even some of the giants in social media, like Gary Vaynerchuk, some of the best, debatable. Some of the authors that I like and enjoy, like Jen Sincero, talks about, this idea of patience. It really and truly is an art. And again, most of these things come from self. So I love the fact that, because you remind me that it does come from self. You have to, in many ways, you have to have it in order to give it, because you know what it feels like. So in knowing, because I know what it feels like when somebody's being patient with me. So in some moments where I see you doing a thing, I'm like, you know what, I need to be patient in this moment. So I'll be patient. So and you've given that back to me. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm just going to wrap up what we've been talking about.
Yes.
One of the things that we have said is when tangoing, when dancing, when loving, first comes love of self. We have talked about open communication, and we have also talked about wanting, not needing. And we've talked about freedom. And these are things that are important to us. You come up with your own, keys of what love looks like for you. I would love to hear what you have to say. Send me an email at yoginifromtheblock@gmail.com. Let me know what resonated with you. Let me know what love means to you. Let me know what definitions you have created in your beautiful blossoming relationships. And for those of you who have relationships, are in a relationship, are looking for that relationship, knowing that you are the love that you are seeking, knowing that you are the divine light, the divine joy, the divine peace that is love. Love dwells within you. There is no seeking. There is no looking out other than where you are, where you sit, who you are. It's who you express yourself to be in this world. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping produce, create, be a part of this production in whatever capacity that is, whether it is behind the scenes or while you're listening. Thank you for your emails, and I look forward to sharing another space, another day, another episode with you. Namaste.